Well folks, round 2 has officially come to a close. It only took us about 2 years, but it's finally over. And now we're heading to the quarterfinals with 8 contestants left, competing for the title of Dinosaur King. We got to see a lot more of their capabilities, strengths, weaknesses, and strategies. More importantly, their performances have influenced the community in deciding who they would like to see advance further and potentially win the entire thing. So I figured, why not rank them all based on who I think should win the least and most. I will take their fights into account for this ranking and predict if they will perform worse or not, but ultimately their placement will come down to my opinion on who I would like to see win. This will be a controversial list, so please don't be upset if your favorite dinosaur isn't high on my list, especially since this is my personal opinion. Feel free to disagree with anything I say in the comments, but please remain civil when doing so. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about a dinosaur I don't want to see win Season 2 under any circumstances.
Disappointment in the game of life!
Tarbosaurus. Oh boy, Tarbosaurus. In case it wasn't obvious enough from my last video, I don't like Tarbo and don't want him to win Season 2 at all. Why? It's mainly because of how annoying some of his fans can be. The biggest reason and justification for why he should win Season 2 has to do with his relationship with the T-Rex. They're both Tyrannosaurids and a T-Rex won last season, so that means Tarbosaurus has to win too. Tarbosaurus is like the T-Rex's cousin, so it makes sense for him to win. He has to follow the footsteps of greatness. He can't lose. I find those comments annoying because that's what a majority of them think. Not all, but a good majority. I know I just said to be civil about opinions, but seeing many people make this argument for Tarbosaurus is so aggravating. The crazy thing is, if you ignore all that and focus on Tarbosaurus for what they aren't that bad of a fighter. Unlike every other dinosaur in this tournament, Tarbo doesn't really outright fight his opponents, at least for the first round. Instead, he observes them. While fighting the Allosaurus duo, he was analyzing their attacks and strategies. Once he caught on with each of their tactics, they didn't work on him again after that. And that was especially the case in the end. He also endured the painful looking attacks from them and continued fighting without feeling drained, which is kind of impressive for Tarbosaurus here. In the second round, we don't see Taro analyze the Polacanthus trio, yet they didn't need to, since the Pola trio had a similar fighting style to the Talururus duo, which would explain why he had no trouble beating them. He was more confident against those three after the first round. He's also one of few dinosaurs who utilized the stage to their advantage. Since the stage boiled down to not getting eaten by the worm, Tarbo used it to take out the Pola trio one by one. And while it does show that Tarbo is not as powerful as the community makes them out to be, it shows that he would rather take the quick and easy approach to win than one that will get him hurt in the long run, which makes sense if you think about it. Why would he try killing the Pola trio himself? Sooner or later, they would have figured out a way to beat Tarbo or leave him with more injuries. It makes sense for him to get rid of them using the worm. He works smart, not hard, and if I learned anything, it is that intelligent dinosaurs are always the most dangerous. Despite all these great qualities, I still would not want him to win the tournament. We already had a T-Rex win Season 1, and choosing Tarbosaurus, a Tyrannosaurus, as champion out of 32 dinosaurs here doesn't sound all that appealing. Let's have a different dinosaur win this time around, no? Still, I have to admit that Tarbo is an amazing fighter. If you're voting for Tarbo because you think he has the qualities worthy of being champion and not just for his relationship with the T-Rex, that's perfectly fine. That's valid and reasonable. But at the end of the day, I want to see this guy get crushed by Brachio. Also, let's not make a Tarbosaurus hate club. That would be a bad idea and make people want to vote for him more than Brachio. Make a Brachio fan club instead.
Alright, here goes. Lunkhead.
I have mixed feelings about Siamosaurus. On one hand, he's probably the worst performing Spinosaur we've seen in DBWC so far, despite having the most unique fight style from the others. On the other hand, I can't help but like the guy. In the first round, he didn't do much against Chunkingosaurus besides slapping his face with her tail, doing some cool looking jumps, and breaking his neck with his iconic death roll. But that's about it. In the second round, we got to see a better look at his capabilities and his fighting style. Although it looked impressive, he failed to pose much of a threat to Megaraptor and acted impulsively while pursuing them, even after getting punished several times for it. Sure, he won in the end, but barely. If we compared Siamosaurus' performance to the other Spinosaurids like Baryonyx and Suchomimus, overall they performed better and didn't struggle nearly as much as Siamosaurus. Then again, as easy as it is to say Siamosaurus was terrible that round, Megaraptor wasn't exactly a pushover either. In a special anniversary battle, we saw a matchup between a Megaraptor and Baryonyx, and in that fight, we see Megaraptor prove to be a fierce carnivore not to be taken so lightly, and even though Baryonyx held their own, they were brutally killed at the end. I know they aren't the same as the ones in the tournament, but they give us a good idea of what they could be capable of. So the fact that Simosaurus essentially fought a nerfed version and still struggled is a testament to how dangerous Megaraptors are. Does this mean that Simosaurus might not be as bad of a fighter as I previously thought? We'll have to see how he performs in round 3 to answer that question. What's funny is that early on, before I made this channel, I wanted to see Simosaurus win Season 2 because he felt like an underdog due to his poor performances. I know I said Ceratosaurus was the underdog of the carnivores, but that's because of how little people want to see him actually be champion. In Simosaurus' case, in universe, he feels like an actual underdog, even more so after propaganda was made against him in favor of Therizinosaurus. And even though he didn't do well in the second round, based on the way he looks down the abyss, it is likely that he'll take future opponents more seriously since he nearly died, and I like to imagine he'll gradually improve the farther he advances. If he were to fight Tarbosaurus, and I mean big if, I'd like to see them win, as it would be thematically fitting for Simosaurus to be one of the strongest carnivores there is in Season 2, as well as making it an overall victory for the Spinosaur family, especially for Spinosaurus after he lost to the T-Rex. That said, the reason he's low on my list now is because I believe the rest of the dinosaurs deserve to win more than Siamo, and so we don't have another Spinosaurus in the finals. I'm not entirely against the idea, but I think it would be better to have an entirely different group of dinosaurs fighting in the finals this time around. So yeah, I don't have any qualms against Simosaurus, but I wouldn't pick him as champion over the other quarterfinalists. I would root for him to win against Tarbosaurus though, if that matchup came to a reality. Therizinosaurus was one of the most popular herbivores in DBWC. Many loved him and wanted to see him become the champion for Season 2, representing the herbivores in the process. I was not one of those people. Sorry to say guys, but he was never my first choice to win the tournament, nor did I think they were good enough to represent the herbivores. I know I made a video trying to defend Theory from the claw argument and even said that he could still pull off some moves with his now only one set of claws, yet I never wanted him to win the tournament. Plus, if I'm being honest, I think that argument had more weight than we care to admit. Therizinosaurus is regarded as one of the strongest herbivores ever, but that cannot be farther from the truth. I don't think Theory is necessarily a terrible fighter, but to say he's the greatest or strongest herbivore isn't true in the slightest, and it's a bit overblown by the community. Their claws are their only means of attacking and killing, and the way they approach their opponents boils down to running or jumping up to them and slashing. And if they fail, they try again. That's it. How does that make him the best fighter? The one tactic Theory used when fighting in both rounds was catching his opponents by surprise. In round 1, he taunted Allosaurus by constantly jumping away from them before seemingly teleporting away after almost getting crushed and slashing at their side. Later on, he would teleport up in the air after being whacked by Allosaurus' tail and literally stabbed them in the back. And the most memorable thing he did was when he pretended to be knocked out by Allosaurus before getting back up and slashing at them once they tried to crush him. The fact he wasn't knocked out or feeling dazed afterward with a frail looking build like his was impressive. While those instances were effective against Allosaurus, the same could not be said against Suchomimus. He tried ambushing Suchomimus using the dust clouds to his advantage, but failed to harm Sucho all that much. He threw sand in his eyes, blinding him for a bit, but didn't take full advantage of the situation when he really should've. Like, dude, he's trying to get the sand out of his eyes, it can't hurt you. Don't roar before attacking, stab him now! I don't think Therizinosaurus has the worst performance here, but they aren't that grand as they're made out to be. You could argue in the first round he did well, but in the second one, I definitely have to say he wasn't all that great. In the end, he did manage to pin Suchomimus after failing to jump him the second time, but it did cost him one of his claws. That shouldn't affect him that much is what I thought, but if we're being honest, it will. Therizinosaurus heavily relies on his claws and has no other methods of attack. No kicks, no tail whips, nada. The real struggle is when he's facing the carnivores. I can see Theory at the very least holding his own against the herbivores, but when it comes to the carnivores, they could easily stop any of his attacks as long as they bite down on his claws. Beforehand, this wouldn't have been an issue for Theory since he used his other set of claws to force them to let go, but he doesn't have them anymore, which means the carnivores aren't at risk when biting his claws to stop his attack. You could argue he could use his beak to force them to release him, but that would be risky since the carnivores could just let go and go for Theory's neck and finish them quickly. You could argue that he could use his clawless arm instead, which is not entirely a bad idea. They just have to hope it doesn't get torn off off in the process. As long as a carnivore has a hold of Theory's claw, he can't do much to harm them without some risk involved. As I said earlier, they need to apply unique movements while fighting, since if they just attack as they usually do, then they're just asking to get killed. Aside from all that, the main reason I have Theory low on my list despite wanting a herbivore to win this season is because of how overrated they are. T-Rex levels of overrated, if you will. Plus, had he won Season 2, people would have just claimed it was because they were Pong's favorite dinosaur, and that's why they won. Which is obviously not true, but I could see people making those claims. It doesn't matter now since their Dinosaurs lost. I'm not too upset by this, but I know many people are, so I give my condolences to all the Theory fans. I know he meant a lot to you all, even if I personally didn't think the same way. But hey, at least we got some funny propaganda, which was probably another reason why they lost. Again, let's not make any more hate clubs.
He's a vicious, cold-blooded predator!
Out of all the carnivores in Season 2, Acrocanthosaurus was the one carnivore that I didn't entirely mind winning. Many would consider Acrocanthosaurus to be one of the strongest carnivores in Season 2, some even ranking him among the top 5 strongest carnivores in DBWC. And to that I say, he's okay, I guess. I also initially thought they were one of the best carnivores this season had to offer, and they were. They presented themselves as an aggressive and merciless carnivore. Sure, they were a little reckless at some points, but they weren't by any means incompetent. He was quick enough to move away from Amatoonia's spin attack, ran up on walls, countered his attacks, and was strong enough to pin Amatonia against the wall with their tail. All of that because he was angry that his food had fallen on the floor. Honestly, Valley Crash out there. His round 1 fight alone had him in my top 3 picks to win Season 2. Sure, I still thought he was somewhat overrated, but not as much as Theory or Tarbo, from what I can see at least. You can't tell me his performance was bad when he first debuted. It was no wonder that so many people wanted to see him be champion. Then round 2 came out. Yeah, Agro honestly felt watered down in this fight, which didn't make sense to me because they acted like a menace in the first round. Until I remembered that the only reason he acted that way was because he was hangry, so since he wasn't carrying any food and didn't lose it to his opponent this time around, it only made sense that he wouldn't be as aggressive as he was in the first round. But because of that, they didn't pose the same level of danger against Dinosaurs. I thought based on the teaser for this fight, he would be calmer and collected, maybe even take a strategic approach against Dinosaurs and not be as reckless, but that didn't really happen. They were still as reckless before, arguably more so than in the first round, as he got hit by Shuno several times, which was surprising for me because I thought Shuno would have had a hard time landing any of their hits. As it turns out, charging recklessly at a Cerapod with a club isn't exactly a smart move. I mentioned in my aggro video that the only way Shuno was going to land any of his hits was if aggro recklessly charged at them, and would you look at that, aggro did do just that. He did endure them a good number of times, which I'll give him credit for, but he shouldn't have gone hit for them in the first place had he been more cautious. I will say the most impressive thing he did in this fight was when he jumped off the worm and dug into the sand, something no other theropod has done before. I also liked how they let Shuno think they won, only to pop out of the sand to kill him and win the fight instead. That fake out was the most memorable thing about that fight, and honestly made Acrocanthosaurus even more memorable. Other than that, they didn't show any more of their capabilities, and if anything, showed us that he was only a great fighter in round 1 because of how furious they were at Amatonia. Yes, pretending to be eaten by the worm only to come back right after was smart of them, and it shows that they are still somewhat competent. But for the majority of the fight, they just charged at Dinosaurs and got punished for not being a little more cautious. This fight shed some new light on aggro that I don't think enough people are talking about. That maybe, just maybe, Acrocanthosaurus isn't the best carnivore in Season 2. If anything, comparing his recent performance with some of the past carnivores in DBWC, he's standard at best, overrated at worst. Ignore the obvious ones, there were other carnivores that I think were better than Acro, like Season 1 Carnotaurus, Megaraptor, and even Tarbosaurus. Sure, everyone except Tarbosaurus lost in the end, but they've shown more skill, strategy, and danger levels to their opponents than Acro did. Megaraptor especially raised the bar in what makes a carnivore dangerous and great at fighting, when he only had one arm and still performed exceptionally well. Some of you might say he'll do better in round 3, but there wasn't a strong indication of that, and that kind of argument can apply to everyone else in the quarterfinals. I would still prefer him to win as the Season 2 champion over the other 3 below because Acro isn't a member of the Spinosaur Tyrannosaur family, has more than one method of attacking, and is serviceable enough to be a candidate for the title of champion, unlike some of the other carnivores in round 2 that people want to see advance. However, as of now, Acro isn't a dinosaur I'm all that hyped to see right now. If any of you disagree with my viewpoint, please tell me why I'm missing here.
But I don't want to use my hand!
After working on the last video for so long, I developed a deeper appreciation for Ceratosaurus. I like his design, I think he's a decent intelligent fighter, and his roar is neat. Even though I don't want to see him advance to the semifinals, I like the idea of this small carnivore winning the tournament, especially over the other carnivores. Imagine him winning against the likes of Tarbo and Agro. That would be the biggest upset in DBWC ever. After all, I did say he had the potential to be one of the best carnivore fighters in Season 2. In the first round, he effectively evaded most of Kentrosaurus' incoming attacks, removed their shoulder spikes with ease, and demonstrated impressive strength for his small build. They honestly fought pretty well. The only weakness they have seems to be low endurance, because even though Kentro only slashed him 2 times, Cerato looked drained from it for a bit, even though most carnivores would have likely brushed it off afterward. Other than that, I had high expectations for them. I genuinely thought he had the potential to be as dangerous as Megaraptor of all carnivores. Then all that potential went down the drain after round 2. Other than the fact that this was the worst fight of round 2, Cera's performance here was rather unimpressive. At the start of the battle, they slammed Diceratops' face into the sand before being flung into the air and getting kicked in the ribs. Afterwards, for most of the battle, all Ceratosaurus did was move away from Diceratops and attack them from the side. They also foolishly slapped them with their tail even though it wasn't doing anything to hurt Diceratops at all, and got their tail stabbed because of it. And in the end, Cera managed to ram his horn into Diceratops' neck right after getting him into this awkward stance while holding onto their horns for a decent while. I was hoping Cera would do more based on his performance in round 1, like maybe triggering Diceratops into getting eaten by the worm by using his rage and speed to their advantage. However, that didn't happen. It's not like he did terribly in round 2, but I expected him to do something new after seeing all the past performances from the carnivores. I was going to place Cera under Agro, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense for why his performance was unimpressive. His opponent Diceratops didn't pose much of a threat to him. There was no reason to try all that much. And if we look back at the part where Cera was swinging their tail at Diceratops when it did almost nothing, this was likely Ceratosaurus feeling overconfident and just messing around because they didn't feel threatened. And when they got their tail stabbed, that's when they decided to wrap up the fight. Based on his reaction, in the end, he probably won't be doing anything like that again, thankfully. I still would have preferred to see both sides have an equal footing, especially in Diceratops' case, but this does prove to me that Cera knows what he's doing and that his potential isn't completely gone. That said, I really think he shouldn't advance further in the tournament, if he isn't even going to win. After his performance in round 2, I doubt anyone will advocate for him to win Season 2, and I will understand that. But then why have him in the semifinals? From what I heard, Cera's portrayed as fodder in dinosaur media, especially against Allosaurus, and I assume people want to give him the respect he deserves by having him in the semifinals. Yet, wouldn't it make more sense for the small carnivore to win the tournament if his reputation is that bad? Why should his run stop at the semifinals? Some of you are supporting other carnivores like Agro and Tarbo to be champion. Why not Cera? If there were a good number of people who at the very least considered Cera to be champion, then sure, have him in the semifinals, but that's not happening at all. I would advocate for Cera, but I would rather Gigant win in this fight, especially since we'll get a never before seen matchup if he's up against Tarbo or Brachio. If it's any consolation, he did reach the quarterfinals, while Allosaurus did not. That has to count for something, right? I like rooting for the little guys, so I'll support Cera if the carnivores are the only ones that remain. If not, then sorry, his run has to end in the quarterfinals. Yeah, as you can see, none of the carnivores are in my top 3 picks. Agro was close, but after his round 2 performance, yeah, no. My top 3 consist of only herbivores. You might call me a herbivore glazer or how herbivores don't deserve to win, but hear me out. A herbivore should win Season 2 no matter what. Not only would it be nice to see the herbivores take a massive dub and how fitting it would be since they have been gaining more respect, but also because they might never get an opportunity like this again. It all has to do with Season 3, or at least whether we get one or not. Some of you might say if a herbivore doesn't win Season 2, we can have one win in Season 3. But there are some problems with that. How likely is it that we'll get a Season 3 for DBWC? If we take a look at the views for Season 2, it isn't doing as well as Season 1. He still gets thousands of views, but in the past, the videos were reaching millions. His most recent ones haven't even reached 500k anymore, and I think Pong is aware of this. He's tried different things to garner a bigger audience, such as changing the title and thumbnail format a few times and uploading shorts of these monstrosities. He even created a new channel, Bull Run Moon, and started uploading another dinosaur fighting tournament, likely to replicate the success of Season 1. He is trying to make his channel as successful as it was back when Season 1 was still ongoing. Unfortunately, that's not happening. It's been what, 6 years since the first episode of the second season premiered? The community is growing up, and they're moving on with their lives, which leads me to ask, why would Pong spend another 6 or so years working on another season when there's a good chance it won't be that successful? You could argue he and his team are doing this for fun, which I'm not saying he isn't, but based on his actions I listed, I do think high viewership motivates him to keep making these kinds of videos. DBWC isn't as popular as it once was. It's one of the best animated series the channel has, so I doubt it'll go away completely. Maybe we'll get some special battles here and there, but I'm not sure we'll get a whole nother tournament for it, especially if the team wants to work on different projects. That's why I'm strongly advocating for a herbivore to win this season. And even if Season 3 is confirmed, a herbivore should still win Season 2 because that will mean every dinosaur has an equal chance at winning. Except maybe for the other members related to the herbivore that wins Season 2. We could even have more carnivores than herbivores in later rounds or vice versa for Season 3. Heck, maybe in all carnivore semifinals like so many people want. And if a carnivore wins Season 3, it will be fine because we already had a herbivore win Season 2. And if a herbivore wins Season 3, then that would be just as nice. I think this will be a better outcome than hoping Season 3 happens and voting for a herbivore to win it. Because then that would mean none of the carnivores have a real chance at becoming champion. Or worse, the community chooses a carnivore to win Season 3 anyway and says something like, we'll pick a herbivore to win Season 4. The 3 herbivores we have left aren't all that bad and are suitable candidates to be our herbivore champion. The question is now, which herbivore do I think deserves to win the tournament and represent the herbivores the most? He's big, he's strong, but most of all, he's a unit of a herbivore. It's Brachiosaurus, everyone. Brachiosaurus is another popular herbivore among the community, and it's no surprise as to why. He has a cool design, the personality of a dinosaur who's done with everyone's crap, and an intimidating presence. I originally didn't like Brachiosaurus because they defeated Carnotaurus, a dinosaur the community voted for to bring back for Season 2, only for the majority to vote against them in favor of Brachiosaurus afterward. I was like, what was the point of bringing him back? Now in the present, I think this was probably for the best since Brachiosaurus is now the only theropod left standing. Also, he's grown on me. That said, there isn't much to talk about Brachiosaurus as a fighter. All he does is whip his tail, stomp on his opponents, and kick them. He's also slower than the other theropods we've seen before, which puts him at a disadvantage. There have been instances of Brachiosaurus moving faster than usual, but for the most part, he's a slow fighter. There's nothing special about him combat-wise, if I'm being honest. So why is he much higher on my pick list when I criticize Theory for essentially only slashing and lacking much skill or strategy in combat? Well, other than because he's a herbivore and not as overrated, it's also because he's a theropod. When you compare Ceratosaurus to the other herbivore theropods, he isn't that great. When you compare Brachiosaurus to the other theropods, they're all generally the same in how they fight, with some minor differences. They aren't supposed to be skilled fighters like every other dinosaur. They're mainly built to be tanky and hit hard, which is why I'm not holding it against them for lacking skill as much as I did with Therity and the others. So instead of going over his performances, since he generally fights the same, I'll go over his strengths and weaknesses. First off, the advantages. Due to their size, Brachio is automatically the strongest quarter-finalist here. Even though his standard attacks are, well, standard, they aren't any less dangerous because of his strength. Stomping on an opponent can result in death, and a good kick to their body can severely hurt them. Any dinosaur unlucky enough to get kicked by him will more than likely feel drained and end up vulnerable to another attack or being crushed to death. In addition, Brachio has a bulky body, and his bulk makes him unaffected by physical attacks from smaller dinosaurs. Even if they aimed at his previous injuries, it wouldn't affect him at all. However, attacks like chomps and slashes can still harm them, but not to the point that they feel immense pain from them. Sometimes he even brushes it off and continues fighting, and even though Brachio is slow for the most part, his sudden moments of moving fast can catch an opponent off guard, which of course could result in death if they don't recover quickly. Pretty solid for their large size. But we also need to acknowledge the drawbacks of being a said unit, because contrary to popular belief, bigger isn't always better. The biggest drawback, pun not intended, Brachio faces is the fact that he's big and slow, which essentially means he's a living, walking, giant target. Many dinosaurs can dodge most incoming attacks due to their builds having fast mobility, but Brachiosaurus lacks it, and that makes him mostly vulnerable to all attacks. I mean, that's pretty much why Carno was able to land many of his attacks on Brachio. Unfortunately, Brachio can move the lower end of his neck, which makes his opponents more inclined to aim there, specifically the carnivores. Carno himself managed to grab a hold of Brachio's neck fairly easily, and the others will likely try the same tactic and bite down harder if they want, which is not good if Brachio has nothing to force forced him to get off. Brachio can counterattack by kicking his opponents, which is probably the best way to defend himself right now, or whipping his tail at them, which has a record of being a hit or miss, so I guess he's not completely helpless. However, it's worth mentioning that his tail is more sensitive to attacks, since we saw him give a painful reaction where Carno bit it down, so maybe he should swing the tail as fast as he can to avoid damage to it, or just not at all, especially when it comes to the herbivores, who have a track record of impaling things. Another struggle he faces is small stages and obstacles. In round 2, we saw him have a hard time getting up and moving around the stage when fighting against the Draco Rex trio, and I feel like it's going to get worse for him. Most stages we saw in the past, specifically from season 1, tend to get smaller or more dangerous the further we get into the tournament. And for big guys like Brachio, that's a problem. We don't know for sure if that will be the case for season 2, but both stages of round 2 were not ideal for Brachio. The final issue Brachio faces is quite specific. His worst matchups are dinosaur teams. Even though Brachio will face issues against most of the quarterfinalists, he can hold on his own in a 1v1. However, when it comes to facing multiple opponents at once, he'll struggle immensely. Brachio nearly died when he was up against the Draco Rex trio. He'll likely strategize or figure out some way to deal with another team of dinosaurs in the future, but that's about it. Thankfully, the only dinosaurs that will need a teammate will be Gigantospinosaurus, Ceratosaurus, and maybe Siamosaurus. Everyone else will more than likely hold on their own against him, which is better for Brachio. If he happens to face either of the three with a teammate or two, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a harder time trying to kill them. Now, even with all these problems, he theoretically can still win. All he really has to do is endure many attacks and stomp or crush his opponents at the end. We saw that happen with the Draco Rex trio. He nearly died after the many attacks they landed on him, but won in the end. Brachio is likely going to struggle a lot the more he fights, so let this be a lesson for all. Just because a dinosaur is bigger than another, it doesn't mean they will automatically win because of it. I'm going to be frank here, but I don't feel that keen toward the idea of him being champion like everyone else. Don't get me wrong, I would much prefer him to win than the likes of Therity or any of the carnivores. I will be completely content if he does, but I prefer our champion having more skill in combat rather than just being big and strong. He's a serviceable herbivore to be champion and has the best chances to win by votes, but I think the other two herbivores would be more fitting and deserving to win. It must be shocking for many of you to see Titanoceratops as my second pick to win Season 2. Admittedly, it is partially because very few people want to see Titanoceratops win over Acro, so I kinda want to root for him because of that. However, that isn't the main reason why Titano is this high on my list. What makes him placed so high is that he is essentially carrying the torch for the Ceratopsian family. Ceratopsians and DBWC are some of the best fighters we've seen. Their build is solid, with them having good bulk, strength, speed, and best of all, their horns as their primary weapon. Some are smaller, have weaker endurance, and have performed poorly, but for the most part, they've been great and iconic fighters. Unfortunately, they almost always die at the hands of a carnivore, or I guess the jaws or claws of a carnivore. Yes, we've seen instances of Ceratopsians winning against a carnivore, but guess what? Those instances were before they lost to a different carnivore. Triceratops won against Carnotaurus but lost to the T-Rex, and Triceratops won against the Raptor-Rex only to lose to Ceratosaurus. And that pattern looks like it'll continue with Titanoceratops predicted to fall to Acrocanthosaurus. If this were to happen, this will mark a tragic end for the Ceratopsian family. I would have accepted this outcome because it looked like he had no chance against Acro. After all, Acro was a monster in the first round. But after his latest performance, I believe Titano has a chance to win. And he should. And from what we saw of him so far, he's a good enough representative for the family group. In the first round, Titano fought pretty decently. He kept Allosaurus on guard for most of the fight, managed to hold him in place using his horns as he was rolling, and threw him in the air afterward. Best of all, he used Halio's own directional attack against him to win the fight. Before that, he got hit pretty bad the first time Halio used that move, and I guess he went for a high risk, high reward mindset, because as Halio jumped for another directional spin, Titano mimicked that attack to counter them. They, of course, suffered major injuries and collapsed to the floor, but got right back up as soon as Halio's injuries became too much to bear and killed them. Ceratopsians are considerably bulky, but the fact that Titano still lived and got up to kill Halio after all that is nothing to brush off. And in the second round, he did show a little more of his capabilities in combat, some of which we've seen for past Ceratopsians, but most notably, he used the directional spin attack again in that fight. Titano could have very well not used that move again, but he instead decided to implement it in his moveset. And you know what? It makes sense. Why stop using it when it was very effective? Why not use it in future fights? Unfortunately, he wasn't successful with it this time around since he didn't use it in the right moment. He should opt for using it as a surprise attack like Halio did. Anyway, he didn't have that hard of a time against Allosaurus since he wasn't as threatening or dangerous as Haliosaurus, but Titano did act recklessly in that fight. In the beginning, he was mindlessly chasing down Allosaurus around the stage, which Allo took advantage of by getting some free attacks on him. Even though Allosaurus didn't cause much harm to Titano in those instances, likely due to Titano's build, could you imagine if he faced someone like Megaraptor? He likely would have suffered more, which is not a good thing considering that some of the quarterfinalists can and will take advantage of this kind of behavior and possibly do more to hurt and injure Titano than Allo did. I used to believe that Titano would remain reckless in future fights given his behavior in the first half of the battle, though I don't think that's exactly the case since later he was more cautious when searching for Allosaurus and managed to move away from their ambush, so I like to believe he learned his lesson here. I also want to mention that he was still able to put up a fight despite having many scars throughout his body. I've seen so many people bring them up as a reason for why they believe they will lose, claiming that they're weak now, which is a fair assumption, but as we can see in round 2, Titano is doing perfectly fine, still capable of fighting and not showing any signs of wear. If anything, the fact that they're still fighting with no issues makes them look better, so you all can stop saying his injuries made him weak. That clearly isn't the case. Overall, Titano isn't that bad for a Ceratopsian, but I also think he could be better. It's not like he's a bad fighter, but he's nothing special or grand either. Again, the reason he's this high is because I like the idea of him winning the tournament and in a way honoring the family name after the many losses they faced, which feels a lot better of a theme to conclude season 2 with than with Brachiosaurus winning, as many members of the community would say. He didn't perform worse in his second fight, but he also didn't improve much, and depending how you view it, that's either a good or bad thing. I would argue he has the potential to surpass Triceratops himself since he was able to hold his own in both fights while Triceratops struggled most of the time in his fights, but right now he's just good. If he were to perform better, then he would be a great contender for my number 1 pick to win a tournament. However, as it stands, he'll remain here as my second pick. If you read my comments, talked with me through Discord, or even noticed the ending of my last video, you probably already guessed who my number 1 pick was before even clicking on the video. So while it might sound like the most insane thing ever, I think Spinosaurus deserves to win and become the dinosaur king for season 2. Now, wait, let me explain. Don't click off the video just yet. I know some of you will hard disagree with me on this and say that Gigant is the one who deserves to win the least. You might say that they can't win because he lost one of his shoulder spikes and an eye, or that he deserves to die after killing your favorite carnivores. You might think it doesn't make sense for him to win when he probably isn't as iconic or well known as the other dinosaurs here. You might even say he's a small, insignificant, rubbish, overrated, tiny stegosaur. And to that I say, no! Have you seen what this stegosaur is capable of? Spinosaurus has shown us that he is just as worthy, if not more deserving, of the champion title for season 2. Admittedly speaking, he wasn't really all that in the first round. He was strategic in his approach to fighting Dilophosaurus, like how he allowed him to chase him down the second time only to counterattack with his Thagomizer after they jumped. However, his performance was nothing too remarkable. Then in the second round, he showed us just how much of a threat he can be. Gigant was pressuring Cyanotyranus throughout the entirety of the fight and wasn't damaged at all because Cyanotyranus couldn't do much against them because of their armor. He resorted to throwing Gigant around in the hopes of either throwing him off the stage or attacking him in a vulnerable state. Unfortunately, none of those attempts went in his favor, which ultimately led to his own demise. What makes Gigant a great and interesting fighter is the way he utilizes his shoulder spikes. He uses them to slash his opponents by dashing or diving toward them, implants one of them into the ground to turn quickly and attack with their Thagomizer or spin like a Beyblade. But the best tactic of all is when he jumps backwards to attack their opponent with their Thagomizer, forcing them to dodge as they naturally would. Then he would spin around to attack them with their shoulder spike, catching the opponent off guard and guaranteeing a hit that could potentially be fatal. This strategy has been the most effective so far since the opponent has so little time to react, and that's because Gigant doesn't use it constantly. If they did, did, then it wouldn't be as effective as it is. The one downside to their shoulder spikes is that any carnivore can bite them down to stop Gigant's attack and possibly harm them. However, he has shown that he can easily free himself from their grasp, like how he did with Demilitarized, who only bit down on Gigant's spikes for the majority of the fight. Even if he can, he has the Dagomizer to use to force them to let go, and I doubt they will want to try and bite down on that, so I'm not too worried for them. Now, I know there will be at least one person pointing out that they lost one of their eyes to Dilophosaurus and how that will hinder them in combat. But as we can see in round 2, they are doing perfectly fine and are not struggling with their sight. And if we pay close attention, we can see that the eye Dilophosaurus supposedly scratched out remains intact. You could argue that it's an animation error, but no matter how you try to frame it, Gigant can still fight just fine, with or without his left eye. Can I also say how biased this argument is? Titanoceratops has many scars on his body, and Gigant may have lost an eye, but they're both able to fight just fine. Yet many people argue that they shouldn't move on because of these injuries. But then why did the T-Rex win Season 1? The T-Rex sustained numerous injuries throughout his fights in a tournament, including broken ribs and a loss of an eye, yet it still received the majority of votes to win Season 1 and is still praised as the strongest fighter in DBWC. What is this double standard? I know it wasn't over thousands of votes like it is now, but I know for a fact most people would have voted for a T-Rex even if his health wasn't the best. If the T-Rex can sustain all those injuries and win the tournament, the Gigant can continue advancing further even if they lost an eye and a shoulder spike. Very minor compared to what the T-Rex suffered from his first 2 rounds. Also, just because Gigant lost one of their shoulder spikes does not mean they are guaranteed to do worse. They still have another one on them and other tools such as their Dagomizer and sharp plates on their back to fight with. Though, the loss of the one shoulder spike does leave him more vulnerable to attacks on that side though. That aside, combat alone isn't enough to make Spinosaurus a worthy candidate to win Season 2. Another reason I want to see him win more than the others is the fact that he is the only Stegosaur that made it past the first round. Every other herbivore group has had more than one member make it past round 1 in the entirety of DBWC. We had a total of 5 Ceratopsians, 4 Ankylosaurs, 3 Ceropods, and even 2 Hadrosaurs. When it came to the Stegosaur family, only Gigant advanced further in a tournament out of the 6 of them, which makes him feel like an underdog. So imagine how insane it would be if he won Season 2. That would be the biggest comeback for the Stegosaur family, maybe even the biggest comeback ever. It would also be a little funny if we went from one of the largest carnivores, the T-Rex, becoming Season 1's champion, to a small Stegosaur, Spinosaurus, winning Season 2. It will be a funny turn of events. I may sound biased when I say this, but Gigant overall is the best representative for the herbivores. I already explained why Theory isn't, so I'll only go over Brachio and Titano. Brachiosaurus mainly relies on his size and strength and has little skill involved, which isn't the best representation for the majority of herbivores. And while Titanoceratops is a decent fighter, if he were to win Season 2, it will feel more catered to winning for the Ceratopsian group than to herbivores in general. As for Gigant, he's sort of a symbol for how the community views the herbivores. Gigant proved himself to be one of the most skilled fighters here with little to no injuries, yet people still undermine his capabilities. That's pretty much how it goes for most herbivores as well. I know they won 4 times in a row in round 2, which is a great accomplishment. However, there are still people who prefer to see 3 carnivores and 1 herbivore in the semifinals, which shows that despite gaining more respect, the carnivores are still viewed as superior. So, imagine how surprising it is that Gigant Spinosaurus managed to kill 2 carnivores in a row, which no other herbivore has done at the time of recording this, except Iguanodon. Funnily enough, Iguanodon is my favorite dinosaur in Season 1, whom I was rooting for to at least make it to the semifinals, and sadly, they did not. I don't want Gigant to meet the same fate. Season 2, to me, is where the herbivores overcome the carnivores and show that they are just as great, if not better than them, which is exactly what Gigant is doing. People even refer to him as the carnivore killer, yet I don't think they're getting enough credit for their capabilities. They're mostly downplayed and overshadowed by the community in favor of the big names like Acrocanthosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Tarbosaurus, or Therizinosaurus. I don't expect or want people to praise them as the best herbivore ever that can solo every dinosaur, but I strongly suggest you at least consider Gigant winning this whole thing. I have seen some comments and voting polls advocating for Gigant a lot more after 30 loss, so at least he has a good chance of making it to the semifinals. I am very pleased to see that. Even then, I do think Gigant is still an underrated herbivore and an underrated fighter. I will support and cheer for him as best as I can. I will advocate for him no matter what. You can call me a glazer or biased, but I will stand by my stance when I say Gigant Spinosaurus should and deserves to win Season 2. Before I end the video, I want to thank you all for all the support on the last video. I did not expect it to do so well, like holy cow. I'm glad y'all liked it. I want to give a huge shout out to VM and Jaden Jaguar for sharing my video with the others. I don't think it would have performed as well as it did if it weren't for them. I don't think I'll make another video like it, but maybe in the future if season 3 happens. If you disagree with any of the points I made about the quarterfinalists, please let me know in the comments below. I like reading comments that have different perspectives from mine, even if I may disagree with them.
My counter argument is that he's ugly.
With that said, thank you all for watching. Subscribe to my channel for when the next video comes out, and comment below your list on who you wouldn't and would like to win season 2. See you next time. Bye bye.